the definition. We dependent on the one that lives within us. Papa put me here to push a mission. If you push against it, that be cataclysmic. All my masters only have one master, like I won the masters. Got a jacket on me, got a pack of homies, and this passion on me. Be a savage till my holy matrimony.
This world gone crazy, but we in it till we die. But I ain't tripping, cause my
Let me show you what it feel like, cause ain't nothing else gon' feel right. There's nobody better, nobody ever, you the trendsetter. There's nobody better, nobody ever, you the trendsetter. At your door like Belvedere, Graceland like Elvis here. A mansion in heaven, no hell to fear. And on my days, my God is near. Always on top like a chandelier. I keep it $1,000, no racketeer. 3 on my side like the Musketeers. And he walks with me, it won't disappear. No, there's really no holding me down. These rivers of water come up from the ground. Every time I come around. Cause I roll with the greatest who's holding the crown. Everything that I got in this life, I'ma give God all the glory. And he go before me, he writing my story right. We these new disciples, Holy Spirit living, Holy Spirit driven. We believe the Bible. I know that Christ was risen, now he thrown sitting. They gon' think we
all right, Flight Week, who's coming? Who's coming to Flight Week 2019? July 14th through the 19th. Want all of you to be able to make it there. It won't be the same if you're not there, all right? So it's going to be in Cedar Hill, Texas at Mount Lebanon. Would love for you to be able to be there. And if money is some sort of issue for you, please come talk to us. We do not want that to be an excuse, but it is $265. Now, if you have a friend who does not know Jesus and does not go to church anywhere, how much does it cost for them to come? It is free. Absolutely free. Free 99. Please bring them along as a guest. And if they don't believe you when they say it's free, tell them to call us. We'll reiterate. No, it is free. Please, 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 please. So please invite them. Sometimes all these people are waiting for is for you to ask them and you to show them that there are no excuses for them not to be able to come. So that's July 14th through the 19th. Please show up for that. Tonight, we have our city cruise still happening at the end of service tonight. So after the service is done and after we excuse y'all, y'all will be in this back room right here. We fixed the AC. So this back room, whenever you walk out these doors and turn left, that's where the city cruise will be tonight. So would love for you to partake in those this evening. If you do ask for a ride from us on Wednesdays, you do have to partake in those city cruise. Everyone else, you're just free to join in on that. Would love for you to be able to be there. We've had food the past couple weeks. Tonight, though, we're going back to our Duger Eats, I believe, and I am so excited about that because it means that someone in here tonight who's taking notes and paying attention will be able to be rewarded with a nice meal from a place of your choosing. That's right. You want Chick-fil-A? We'll go get you Chick-fil-A. You want In-N-Out? We'll go get you In-N-Out, all right? Or if you want the holy food of Whataburger, you can get that too. So that's what we've got going on. Senior recognition. Where are my seniors? Class of 2019, are any of y'all in here? Woo! If you are trying to partake in senior recognition, that is this Sunday, and we would love for you to be a part of that and be celebrated by the church. If you have not already RSVP'd to me, please do so. If you have not already given pictures, a senior photo and a baby photo, please do so because after tonight, I'm going to be on you, all right? I'm going to be after you, like, where are those pictures? But just want you to partake. Look at your friend and go, shh. How many of you are good with kids? Then I need you to help out with Kids Craze. So Kids Craze is kind of like for some churches, they call it Vacation Bible School, but it is going to be in June, and we would love for you. It's going to be the week of the 10th, whatever that is. I don't know those numbers in my head right now, but if you want to sign up for Kids Craze, we have a sign-up table right back there for you to put your name down, and our amazing children's ministry will be in contact with you to help out with that. Some of you told me last week that you want to do that. Awesome. Sign up on that anyway. Even if you've already verbally told me, go ahead and sign up on that sheet to help out, all right? If you are interested in helping out with our tech crew, you want to be a part of the tech and worship elements we have here, then please contact crosscitystudents.tech@gmail.com or just go talk to Bosch sometime tonight and say, hey, I'm interested. What do I need to do to get that ball rolling? Okay, always looking for you to be able to use your talents and your gifts to be able to be part of the kingdom and to use that for the glory of God, and we want to help you find out how to do that. Baptism. If you have not yet gotten baptized and you've made a decision to follow Christ recently, we would love to help you make that first step of obedience. So if you want to do that, come talk to one of us tonight, and we will schedule that for whenever you are available. We'll do that on a Sunday. We'll do that on a Wednesday. We'll do that on a Thursday. Whenever you want to make that happen, we will do that. This is just to get this out of the way. Thank you all for the congratulations tonight. For those of you who aren't aware already, last night I asked Anna to marry me. And I don't know where she is right now. Is she in the room? Anna, are you back there? Nope, she's hiding. All right. Well, when you see her, say, what were you thinking? Ah, hi, I love you. All right, she's back there. Congratulate me and then pity her because she has to marry this. But anyway, I love you. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. Hi. All right. So once again, thank you for everyone who gave all those congratulations and that. Appreciate you. And you're all invited to the wedding. So, yes, even you. Do I know when that is for sure yet? Nah, but we'll let you know. Anyway. Huh? Benny, did you ask if you could be the ring bearer? Maybe. I don't know. We'll talk about that. I'll have tryouts. I don't know. All right. Moving on, though. Again, thank you for that. Here's what I want you to do for me now, though. Because you've been so nice to me, I'm going to do something for y'all, and we're going to play a game tonight because I want all of you to be able to have the opportunity to get something on
I don't need permission, I'ma do it all today.
This is something that
They just
everyone
can't
can be
believe it,
involved
man.
in.
That's all
I
they
need
gonna
everyone
say.
to
See these plays
stand
up on my
up.
Spotify, that's money in the bank
And
up
we've
on my
done a game
face.
similar to this before, but
Hey, don't got
it's a
time
little
to
different.
waste.
So
I
you
don't
need to listen
permission,
very
I'ma do
carefully
it all
tonight.
today.
All right?
They just can't believe it, man. That's
So,
all they gonna say. See
I
these
have a
plays
list
up on
of
my
questions that
Spotify,
is
that's
going to
money in the
divide the
bank.
room.
On my face.
And I have asked one person in this
I
room
don't need
their
permission, I'ma
opinion
do it
on
all
these
today.
questions.
They
You
just
have to
can't
match up
believe
with
it,
this
man.
one
That's all
person.
they
Last time
gonna
we told you who that
say. See
person
these
was.
plays up on my
This time I'm not telling you who
Spotify,
this
that's
person
money
is
in the
until the
bank
end
up on my
tonight.
face.
So, you have
Don't
to
got time
side
to
with
waste.
one of
I don't
these
need permission,
options.
I'ma do
If
it
you do
all
not
today.
side with the option that this mystery
They
person
believe it,
picked,
man. That's all they
you have
gonna
to sit
say.
down.
See these plays
if you
up on my
sided with them
Spotify,
correctly,
that's money
you can
in
stay in the game. All right?
By my face.
So, first question. If you could only keep Netflix and YouTube or social media, which would you keep? Netflix and YouTube or social media? You've got 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Are y'all not wanting to play? Y'all are out? Y'all just gonna participate? Watch? Okay. So you're hoping that they said keep Netflix and YouTube? You're saying that he said to keep social media? Y'all are still in. Okay. Y'all have to sit down. Love you, mean it. All right. If you could only keep chicken or only keep beef, would you keep chicken or would you keep beef? You got burgers. You got some kinds of hot dogs, the good kinds. You got steak. You're saying would only keep chicken. Any beef products, any chicken products. Steak, burgers, etc. Okay, dark meat. Alright.
Still undecided. Me and my homies are still undivided.
Okay,
Labels
well,
keep
either
telling us this for so long.
Alright,
if
so
you're
you're
making dope
saying
music, there's no
only
way to
that you would
hide
keep
it.
beef.
God Almighty telling
You're
me
saying
what
you would
to
keep
do.
chicken.
Rappers complaining on
This
our team
person-
of lose.
Hurry up, hurry up,
Dream
hurry up,
about
hurry up,
heaven
hurry
and
up.
seeing my grandmother too.
Would keep
Living the life that I choose. Working in suits never
beef.
suited me too.
Y'all have to sit
Trusting
down,
in
y'all
God
are
always
out.
let me confused. They call me villain, I feel like it's true. Can't
Would
talk
you
about God, I
rather
can't share my
have
views.
hot
All of these
weather
rappers are
or
all of your
cold
friends.
weather?
You can do good, just
Hot
not
weather
better
over
than
here.
them. I am the villain.
Cold
They
weather
only
over
like
here.
me as long as I make all the songs that
that you would rather have hot weather. You're saying you'd rather have cold weather. They would rather
I'll be the
have
back at the feeling. I'll be the back at the feeling. But only if that's
cold
what you
weather.
feeling. The back at the
Go
feeling.
ahead and sit
Yes,
down.
I'm the back at the feeling.
$1 million in Amazon gift cards or $100,000 in cash.
I guess I'm the back at the feeling.
Gift cards.
Yeah.
100 grand in cash. $1 million in Amazon gift cards.
This ain't for radio, this is for us.
100K in cash. $1 million in
Walking through hell
Amazon
and I
gift
never was
cards.
touched.
All right. You're
Never
over
been
here. You're saying
perfect,
you'd
no
rather
one
have $100,000
side.
in cash.
Hey.
Who's still playing over
Without
here?
his grace, I be living a lie. They talk about me like I'm
anyone
not
over here
around.
still
I
playing?
remember the times when I would
So
talk
all
to
of
God
you
and I
on this
told him
side are saying
whatever
you'd
you
rather have
wanna
$1
be
million
down.
in
I
Amazon
should've
gift
drowned.
cards?
I am the villain that put
This
on the
is
crown, but he
interesting.
died for the villain.
Because
Yeah, cause I'm still the
that
villain.
means that
And the
everyone
world does not love me.
loses.
Hey,
Because
cause I'm
this
not
person
one
would
of
rather
them
have
now.
100K in cold, hard cash. Huh? This is an adult. I didn't say it was a kid, I said it was a person. So the question is, do y'all want to try again or do y'all just want to move on? Okay, lightning round. All right, here we go. Everyone's back in. Because nobody won. All right. You've only got 10 seconds for each of these. All right. Hang out at the beach or a lake house. Beach or a lake. Beach or a lake. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lakes are still in. Beach out. All right. Xbox or PS4? Xbox or PS4? Go. Xbox or PS4? You gotta pick one. Xbox is over here. PS4 is over here. I'm not saying who.
Night. Hall of Fame.
5,
On my
4,
mind. Trying to be
3,
the greatest
2,
of all time.
1.
And say it's
Xboxes
all
are still
God.
in. Y'all are still in.
I've been grinding
PS4,
all
sit
day.
down.
And
All right, this is an important one.
Hall of Fame. On my mind. Trying to
iPhone,
be the
Android.
greatest of all time. And say it's all God. That's all.
I'm not saying it's necessarily what you have. It might be what you want, but whatever.
Hall of Fame. On my
iPhone?
mind. Trying to be the
Android?
greatest of all time. And say it's all
They
God.
said Android. iPhones are out.
I got no time for the nonsense. I
Whataburger
got
versus
dope
In-N-Out.
vibes on my
Whataburger.
conscience. Oh
In-N-Out.
God, I don't mind if you gon' give me a
5,
label. I ain't here for
4,
your pesos, only faithful to
3,
Jesus and not an underdog. Trying to
2,
Cujo mix with DMX.
1. Everybody
The
says
guys
Whataburger.
turn, so you know
Y'all
you
are all
gon'
still
see
in.
him flex.
Very good.
Geo.
Do you use toilet paper wadded up or
We know-
folded?
Way, we
Wadded
on
up
way.
or
Nah, I don't do on
folded?
the BK dot, tryna do on your BK West. Yeah, I do all my beats a PK that a do on your beat. Take a smash, then take a smash on it. 80s baby playing Super Smash Brothers, eating mics like I'm at the last supper or the Passover. I've been passed over, said I
Folded
rather pop like a
stays.
flat soda.
Water's
Said to get
out.
your guy,
All
switching
right.
raps over. Y'all choosing sides.
Nike
I'm designing
or
the entree.
Adidas?
Oh, you tryna get big, boy? Well, I'm tryna be Andre.
Hold up.
Be Andre. All glory to God, name.
You gotta ask. You ask yourself this question.
And all night.
Does it,
Hall of
you
Fame.
don't care.
On my
You do
mind.
realize if
Tryna
he's
be the
right,
greatest
he
of all
wins.
time. And say it's all God. I've been grinding all day.
Are you sure?
And all night. Hall of Fame. On my mind.
Congratulations,
Tryna be the
he
greatest
wins.
of all time.
They
And
said
say it's
Adidas.
all God.
The person
That's
that
all.
you matched with
I'm not stopping
is
till my
Heather
mama
Snell.
calling, bruh, telling me she proud
All
of
right.
us. Homie saying,
You get to
yo,
go
your
back
Twitter
and grab something from the
follower
cafe.
count is
Go
up.
ahead and get
At
something
your
from
shoulder,
back
got their
there.
hands up like you
Hey,
say you
don't
got
look
it,
at
got
me.
it, got
I'm
it,
about
you got
Nike
it,
as well.
This
All
the
right?
guy that got us
But
signed.
everyone
And I want
is
this
part of the same
dollar
church here.
listening to this
Here's what I need you to do
tape
right now. I need
saying
everybody to
house
stand
way.
up. I need you to say
Funny
hi
thing
to
is they
5
said I was the
people
one who sound like
and welcome them
Kanye.
here
For
tonight.
all the
Give them the
labels, they
hardest
assigned
high
me,
five
give a
you
trophy
can.
back. For
Go.
all the labels wouldn't sign me like a Zodiac. I got more drive than a Honda. I got more rounds than Shonda. Shooting more shots than Kobe Bryant.
Alright. So everybody stay standing. We're about to enter into this time of worship tonight. If you're sitting down, go ahead and stand up. where you can just talk about and be able to ready to discuss certain objections people have to Christianity. Tonight, Tommy Turner is going to be preaching tonight. Super excited about what he's going to be talking about the resurrection. But tonight I'm asking you, whatever you got going on in life, whatever drama, whatever anything you got going on, if it's in this room, and maybe over this time you need to go to the person that you need to clear the air, you need to talk with them about something so that way there's not drama over this evening. I'll wait for this thing.
Or maybe tonight you just got so much on your mind that you're having a hard time focusing. We've got prayer cards up here, and we do pray over these whenever you fill them out. And it's our pleasure to do so. You don't have to put your name on them. You can leave them anonymous. But maybe over this next song or over this time of worship, you need to just come down here with a friend and say, will you pray with me? I've got a lot on my mind. I've got a lot that I'm worrying about. Or maybe it's not something that other people would say is a lot, but it's a lot to you. And if it's a lot to you, then it still matters. But we're glad you're here. But here's what I'm going to ask you to do. If you brought a friend or if you're here with a friend, maybe you've been here for a while, it's your first time, but please just don't be a distraction. But I'm asking you to help each other out and push each other forward in helping each other focus. If you can't do that for your friend tonight, then don't sit with them. If you can't help them focus, but you can only hinder their focus, then I'm going to ask you to refrain, and I'm going to ask you to just maybe sit off to the side, whatever you need to do, whatever helps you focus and helps them focus. Because I guarantee you, you don't have anything better to say to them than God has to say to them tonight. Heavenly Father, we thank you for every student in this room, and I just pray over this time of worship that they actually make this a time of worship, not just a time of singing songs, not just a time of talking with their friends, but that they're trying to talk to you and hear from you and remind themselves of who you are in this time. We love you, and thank you for everyone once again for being here, and let us all draw nearer to who you are tonight. And all this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. We want to welcome you to Cross City students. We're so thankful that you're with us tonight. We just want to sing and praise God. He's given us so many reasons to sing, and so we ask you and invite you to sing with us tonight. Turn my eyes. Turn my eyes to see you, Jesus, in all your glory. Turn my eyes to Amen. Amen. The reason we want to center our life on Jesus Christ is because Jesus Christ is the mighty warrior. And so as we continue to sing, we're going to lift up attributes that what make God who he is. So let's continue to sing tonight. Sing it tonight. You call us out from the depths. You call us out from the depths into your freedom. Our chains are gone. No weapon formed shall prevail. Your word is stronger. We overcome. Your glory resounds through the age, and all saints declaring your great renown. Your kingdom forever will stand. Oh, we won't be shaken. We will not fear. 'Cause our God, a mighty warrior, you're a consuming fire. In victory you reign. We triumph in your name. Jesus, the great commander, you conquered death forever. In victory you reign. We triumph in your name. Whoa. Your glory resounds through the age, and all saints declaring your great renown. 'Cause your kingdom forever will stand. And no, we won't be shaken. We will not fear. 'Cause our God, a mighty warrior, you're a consuming fire. In victory you reign. We triumph in your name. Jesus, the great commander, you conquered death forever. In victory you reign. We triumph in your name. And we declare your name is power. An exalted one, your name is higher. You stand alone, our strong defender. And above you there's no other. Above you there's no other. And we declare your name is power. Exalted one, your name is higher. You stand alone, our strong defender. Above you there's no other. 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 'Cause our God, a mighty warrior, you're a consuming fire. In victory you reign. And we triumph in your name. Jesus, the great commander, you conquered death forever. In victory you reign. And we triumph in your name. Our God, a mighty warrior, you're a consuming fire. In victory you reign. We triumph in your name. Jesus, the great commander, you conquered death forever. In victory you reign. We triumph in your name. Whoa. for criminals and every Pharisee. You came for hypocrites, even one like me. You carried sin and shame, the guilt of every man, the weight of all I've done, nailed into your hands. Let's sing this out tonight. I know your love bled for me. Know your blood, crimson streams. Know your death is hell's defeat. A cross meant to kill is my victory. I've seen and tasted it, and it's running through my veins. I can't escape its grip. In you my soul is safe. You cover everything. Know your love bled for me. Know your blood and crimson stream. Death is hell's defeat. The cross meant to kill is my victory. Let's lift this up tonight. Behold the Lamb. Behold the Lamb of God, who takes away our sin, who takes away our sin. The Holy Lamb of God makes us alive again, makes us alive again. Behold the Lamb of God, who takes away our sin, who takes away our sin. The Holy Lamb of God makes us alive again, makes us alive again. Oh, your love bled for me. Know your blood and crimson stream. Know your death is hell's defeat. The cross meant to kill is my victory. Oh, a cross meant to kill is my victory. Amen. As we continue to worship, I just want you to turn your heart, and for this last song, just make this a song where you're singing it straight to the very ears of God. And let the words minister to your heart. Can't go back to the beginning. I can't control what tomorrow will bring. But I know here in the middle is the place where you promised to be. Not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? Sing that straight to God. all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? As I walk now through the valley, let your love rise above every fear. Like the sun shaping the shadow, in my weakness your glory appears. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Let's sing it. I'm not enough. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Yeah. Oh. Not for a minute was I forsaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. And come, Holy Spirit, dry bones awaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Not for a minute was I forsaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. So come, Holy Spirit, dry bones awaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this God move tonight. God move tonight. Sing this again. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? God, tonight, that's our prayer. That God, no matter what we do, we fall short. God, as I look out, I see student upon student who is struggling right now with brokenness. God, they walked in with a heavy heart, and God, I just pray that you would move tonight in their hearts. God, we know that we're not enough. We know that there's nothing that we can do, but God, we are praying and we are relying on you. And so God, move tonight. Whatever burdens we carry, speak through the word and give us something tonight. God, we're praying as we talk about the resurrection of Jesus Christ that some of us, God, we need to resurrect our broken lives. We need life breathed back into the deadness that is our life. God, we need life breathed back into our families, into our schools, into our relationships. God, breathe life tonight in everything that we have. Speak to us. I pray all this in the powerful name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Amen. Hey. All right, let's take our. Can we give it up for Bosch and the band just one more time? Can we? Week after week after week, they come up here and lead us into worship. And so thank you. Thank you for that, Bosch. All right, guys. So we're still in this series. Come at me, bruh. Come at me. We're trying to take a look at the Bible, take a look at what it says, and see if we can start picking it apart. Ben quoted just the other week, and I want to make sure I get it right, said Christians used to be known for loving God with their minds, but too often we only love him with our emotions. That is us in this day and time, that we really look at how we feel about a thing, and then we make decisions based on how we feel. And that when we look back to early Christians, early first century Christians, when it very began, that they were intellectuals that said, wait a minute, can this be true? Is this true? It doesn't sound plausible, but maybe we can unpack it. Maybe we can look at the actual evidence and know that it can be true. And then Ben later on went to say that if you believe because of your feelings, then you'll stop believing when those feelings change. That if all that you're holding on to with your belief in God, that your belief in Christ is just a good, warm, fuzzy feeling that you had, some goosebumps that you felt, that once those go away, that maybe you wouldn't feel that way anymore. So your faith in Christ, your faith in salvation has to be built on something more than just some warm fuzzies. And so tonight, we're going to unpack some of that, talking about the resurrection of Jesus, the very linchpin of Christianity. This is the cornerstone. This is the thing that binds us all together. That if Jesus did not resurrect from the dead, what are we doing? That all of our beliefs fall, that he's not God incarnate, that his payment on the cross was not for all of our sins, that everything that we believe about Christianity begins to unfold because of that. And so we've got to look at this resurrection and go, is this historical fact? Before I jump in tonight, I just want to give a shout out. Right back in that corner is my mom and my older and younger sister. And so, hi Mom, hi Tiff, hi Risa. For as long as I can remember, my mom has said, you will be on stage preaching someday. And tonight is the night that she gets to actually see that come to pass. And so how awesome is that a thing that's been spoken into my life, literally since as long as I can remember, she gets to bear witness to God fulfilling that in me. And so oftentimes the thing that she says to me is, I'm so proud of God in you. And so thank you for speaking that into me for so long. I'm so glad that you get to be here. So let's talk. Let's talk about this resurrection of Jesus. We hear it preached about a whole lot. Easter just passed, right? And we celebrate the resurrection that happened on Sunday morning. And so we talk about it year after year after year, but what are we really talking about with this resurrection? And so tonight what I want to do is I want to unpack some facts, some historical facts, the same way that you would sit in a history class and go over dates and events and people and go, this is what actually happened. And I want to do that tonight, not only with the Bible, but even outside of the Bible, look at some secular texts and go, what does history tell us about what happened? And so here's some things that we need to look at. When we're looking throughout history and trying to find out, hey, did this thing happen or did it not happen, right? And so if we're looking throughout history, here's what we need, is I need some eyewitnesses, right? Primary sources is what they call it. I need some eyewitnesses to tell me, hey, what happened? Anybody watch a basketball game last night? Who won? The Warriors. Who did not watch a basketball game last night? Who won the game last night? Who, you didn't watch it? Who won the game? The Warriors. Now, you can say confidently that the Warriors won the game even if you didn't see the game, because we've got some eyewitness testimony that's yelling, the Warriors won the game last night. You don't even have to be a basketball fan. You don't have to know who the Warriors are or where they come from, but you go, well, there's enough eyewitnesses that said that they saw it firsthand, and so I can believe that. So that's how we look at first is, hey, who saw, who lived, who actually breathed when Jesus was alive and saw what he saw? The second thing we look at is secondhand testimony. So maybe it wasn't the testimony of those who actually saw the thing, but those who knew them. Hey, you saw Jesus? You lived with him? You walk with him? You talk with him? Tell me about that. And then I'm going to listen to that testimony and see what that person has to say. So when we're looking through history, I want to look at eyewitness testimony and I want to look at secondhand testimony. But then, here's how we look at ancient history, right? Like really old stuff. I need to find some people that wrote about it. I need to find what they call manuscripts. I need to find people that wrote down the events, that recorded those events. And so let's talk about one. Outside the Bible is the Iliad. The Iliad. If you did any, like, maybe you don't remember that name, but it's about Homer and Queen Helena gets kidnapped in the Trojan War and the Trojan horse. You guys remember the Trojan horse, right? Like they all snuck inside the horse, said, hey, it was a present, popped out, and hey, we're taking over everything. So this story has almost 1,800 different ancient copies of it from different places that we can look back and go, hey, this will all point us back to when this was originally written, and the story is consistent throughout, and we can look at that and go, hey, this is the story of the Iliad. If you tried to change some things, well, you look at 1,800 different copies and go, no, it's all consistent here, so if they changed it, that's not consistent with these 1,800 copies. When we look at the New Testament alone, there are over 5,800 different copies that are ancient, that all point back and say the exact same thing. There's about 3 times as many as the next closest manuscripts. There is a mountain of evidence that says, hey, the New Testament is correct. The New Testament is an accurate representation of the Jesus, of the life of Christ. It is an accurate representation because we all wrote about it. Now, here's the other thing, and go with me and we'll jump into some slides, is you have to look at how long ago a thing happened, right? You have to talk about how long ago did this happen when I wrote it down? Because we're talking about a ball game that happened last night. But if I asked you, if I told you, hey, so-and-so won the year you were born, maybe you don't know about that. But maybe you do, if it's a big enough event, right? Maybe you can talk through some of that. So how long ago? Because when we look at history, when we look at fact, sometimes things like legends can weave their way into facts, right? Like, if I tell you, like, oh, man, I was in a fight last night, and, like, 2 dudes jumped me, and I beat them up, and then, like, you go and tell that story, and then it's like, man, like, 6 dudes were there, and Tommy beat them up, and then, like, you tell your grandchildren that, and they're like, yeah, and 30 guys were there, and, right? Like, you know how that happens. Like, it's just like a telephone game, that the story can get embellished. Well, history tells us that in order for legends to take place, it takes about 2 centuries, right? About 200 years for a legend to take place. And here's why. Because if you were there and you saw it, and then I was telling something that wasn't true, I was embellishing the story, you would go, that's not true. That's not what happened. And if you or your parents were there, right? Your parents were there and they saw it and they told you what happened, you go, no, that's not what I've been told at all. Like, here's what happened. So it takes lifetimes from the point of a thing happening to when it happens for legends to build up. And here's the fun part about the New Testament, is the New Testament dates back to just years after Jesus died. Some of the creeds, some of the sayings in there date back to months after Jesus died. And then all the New Testament is written between that time and about 50 years later, 50, 60 years later. All of it within the lifetime of people who were alive, breathing, saw Jesus. If they didn't see him, they knew people that saw him. And it all happened right around the location of Jerusalem. Man, if I'm going to tell you that the Dallas Cowboys are the greatest team on earth and they've won all the Super Bowls for the last 10 years, I can't do that to you. Thank you. But I can't lie to you like that. But if I went to Detroit and did it, I couldn't do it there either. They're too close to the source. If I went halfway around the world to Bangladesh and started telling that, maybe it flies. They're really far away from right here, and they don't really care about what happened. And so maybe I could spread that story, but that's not the way it works when we look at the New Testament. They're right there in the city that it happened, telling the story. And so that's how we can look at history and look at historical texts and go, hey, does this pass the test? Is this true? If you look at enough eyewitnesses, if it's written within a time frame that doesn't allow for legends to be created, then we can look at that. And so let's talk about the facts, because if we look outside of the New Testament at just secular data, like non-Christian history, what do they say? What do they say about this Jesus? All of them can be boiled down to this, all of them. That Jesus was crucified by Pilate, that he was believed by his disciples to be risen on the third day, that he was believed to do miracles, that Christianity could not be contained, and that even though Rome, like Nero and other leaders, were persecuting the Christians, it still began to spread because they lived these dedicated lives. That on the basis of non-Christian sources, it does not in any way conflict with, but rather confirms all the accounts of the New Testament. There's nothing that any historians say that conflicts with the accounts of what happened as far as the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so let's talk. Facts. Real big facts. I don't know what's happening. There we go. Facts. Fact number one, Jesus. He was a real man. He's a real man that walked. This is not a fable. This is not a tale of some guy that might have lived at some point in time somewhere. No. Fact, inside the Bible, outside the Bible, Jesus was a real man that walked this earth. That he lived and ate and was known as a wise man to some and as a miracle worker to others, but Jesus was a real man. This wasn't a made-up account of somebody who's like, oh, let's just like think of what this guy would be like. No. Real. Absolutely real. Lived at the time the Bible says he lived. Real person. Second fact, that Jesus absolutely died by crucifixion. That there are these theories that try to debunk the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And one of those, just one of those, is, oh, well, Jesus didn't actually die on the cross. He actually swooned on the cross, is what they say. Like, it seemed like he died, like he fainted. Like, oh, I'm dead. And then, like, they got him off the cross, and then, like, he was fine. But history says, no, that's absolutely not the case. That the Romans were excellent at killing people. Excellent. This was a pastime of theirs. I don't want to know just how to kill people. I want to know how to torture people until they die. That death by crucifixion happened because you would die of exhaustion and suffocation. That when they would nail you to a cross, they would nail you in such a way that all the pressure was on your lungs and you had to fight up to go. And it would happen again and again and again until you were exhausted and you couldn't pull up anymore, and so you sat there and suffocated. That Jesus died of this crucifixion. So there's no way for us to look and say, hey, no, he didn't really die. Even the Quran points to Jesus and said, no, it wasn't actually Jesus that died on the cross. It looked like he died, he didn't. There's no way that this happens in Roman society, that Jesus is allowed to live on that cross. Because if you're a Roman soldier, not only is it your job to be great at this, but if it's your job to crucify Jesus and they find out that he's not dead, guess who gets to die instead? Yeah, you get to take his place. And so we have to look at that. And here's what the Bible says about that in Matthew. In Matthew, this is an eyewitness testimony to Jesus Christ. It says this, what then should I do with Jesus, who is called Christ? Pilate asked. They all answered, crucify him. Why? Asked Pilate. What evil has he done? But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. That Pilate crucified him, the Sanhedrin, the ruling government of Jews, crucified him, that the people, the crowd said, crucify him. That this wasn't a mistake, that he didn't live throughout this. he was crucified. When you read later on in the New Testament, it says that normally, so here's what would happen. Normally is they would go and break the legs of a person being crucified so that he could no longer pull himself up to breathe. It would speed up the suffocation that would happen. When they got to Jesus, instead of breaking his legs, they said, oh, he looks like he's already dead, and they hit him with a spear. And it says blood and water came out. Now, health class, I don't know if they even talk through this, like you gotta go watch Dexter for this, but what happens after you die is when your blood stops pumping, the plasma separates in your blood, and what happens is you're left over with blood and water. And when they pierced his side, that's what they said came out was blood and water to confirm that he is in fact dead, that he has been dead. So Jesus absolutely died on this cross. Third fact, Jesus was buried. Jesus was buried. Jesus was put into a tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. This was a well-known, wealthy man, and he was a member of the ruling government of Jews. So it's called the Sanhedrin for those of you that study, but here's the idea. The same folks that said, crucify him, kill him, one of their guys is the one who says, you can use my tomb to put him in. It's a bit embarrassing when the guy who's supposed to be your Messiah not only is crucified, but you can't even afford a tomb to put him in. That you put him in the tomb of the very man that's responsible for killing him. Right? Like maybe it wasn't him, but it was his team, right? And so this is a fact that's recorded in the Bible and outside of the Bible, and it's a bit embarrassing. And here's one of the other things about historical text is this. If I'm going to make up a story about myself, you're going to make up a story about yourself, are you going to include things that make you look good and better than you are, or things that embarrass you? We all know the answer there. If I'm making up something, I'm going to make myself look good. I'm going to paint myself in a fair light. I'm not going to include anything that's embarrassing to me unless I'm not making it up, unless it is the truth. And that is an embarrassing detail, that Jesus and his disciples could not afford their own tomb. So they put him in the tomb of Joseph and Arimathea. So Jesus absolutely was buried. This is attested in multiple ancient manuscripts that date back to just the months before or months after Jesus died, was that, yes, he was absolutely buried in a tomb. That we know this from the account, right, that Jesus was buried in a tomb. It says this in Matthew, same book, later on. So Joseph, this is that Joseph of Arimathea, so Joseph took the body and wrapped it in clean linen cloth and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut into the rock. Then he rolled a great stone across the entrance of the tomb and went away. If you've ever been across the street and walked into the main entrance, you see that we have a tomb with a stone that's rolled away. It's an empty tomb. That is the picture of what happened here. That they put his body in a tomb after he was covered in spices and wrapped in linen, and they rolled a stone in front of that tomb to say, this is where our Lord rests. This is where we can come back and pray and grieve and mourn. This is the spot where he's at. And they fully expected him to stay there. So Jesus was a real man that really lived. He really died by crucifixion. And he was buried. He was put into a tomb. Next big fact, not argued at all by anyone in history, is that this tomb was empty. That 3 days later, this tomb has no body in it. And it's such a weird thing for everybody at the time. Because as soon as this happens, here's what you have to realize, is Jesus' followers, the ones who called him Lord, who called him Messiah, when he was crucified, they scattered. They ran because they didn't want the same thing to happen to him. They denied him. They said, no, I'm not his follower. No, I don't know him. I've never seen this man. They scattered. So now this tomb is empty, recorded in and outside the Bible. And here's what we have to look at is, why is the tomb empty? Who has motivation to empty said tomb? So we can look at Rome, right? The governing power at the time. Rome actually put soldiers in front of the tomb to guard the tomb. These soldiers were fighting men that were not easily overtaken. Not only did they have the men there guarding the tomb, they put a seal across the stone, which is really just a fancy term for a giant piece of string or rope that blocked the tomb and that had the stamp or the seal of Rome on it. And here's what everybody knew. Wherever you go, if the seal of Rome is on this and you break this, whatever you do, if you break this, they will kill you for it. It doesn't matter what it is. And so this seal is put across Jesus' tomb in front of the big stone, and now they have guards that are posted. Rome does not want Jesus to get up and leave. They don't want his body to disappear. That's why they have the guards there. That's why they put the seal there. And then we look at the Jews, right? This governing body, the Sanhedrin that we talked about earlier. The Jewish leaders did not want Jesus' body to disappear. The Jews are the ones who actually went to the Romans and said, hey, put guards there in the event in case they try to come and take his body. So guard there. They're the ones who asked the Romans to guard it. So now they have no motivation to come and take the body of Jesus. And then his disciples, they didn't even know that Jesus was going to get up again in 3 days. Like, we read about Jesus talking about that, but they didn't think that was going to happen. They're surprised than anybody else when the tomb is empty. They're going, where are they taking his body? What's happened? What does this look like? And so the tomb is empty 3 days later. In Luke, it says this, they found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. So go with me here. They show up to this tomb, and the stone has been rolled away. If they had been expecting Jesus to be gone, they're just excited right then and there. But no. The stone was rolled away, and they walk in looking for the body. Where is his body? And instead, they find grave clothes there. The linens that he'd been wrapped in left right there. And so this tomb being empty is something that we've got to deal with. We've got to deal with. And so here's what happened. The Jewish leaders say, hey, here's what we're going to tell everybody. Roman soldiers, we're going to tell everybody that you fell asleep. And while you were sleeping, the disciples came and stole the body of Jesus. I'm going to pay you for it. Now go spread that message. Now, I don't know how many of you guys are slick and good at lying. Don't raise your hands. But just go with me on this one. Here's the story I'm telling you. I was there, I fell asleep, and while I was asleep, I know exactly who came and stole the body. Where's the hole in that? Thank you. You were asleep. How you know who stole the body? Does not stand up, does not hold water, right? Like, one, we know it's a lie, but here's the other piece that we can look at. If I have to make up a lie to explain why the tomb is empty, it guarantees the fact that the tomb is empty. Do you see what just happened there? If I have to lie about why the tomb was empty, we can debate that and discuss that all day, but it guarantees the fact that the tomb is empty. That nobody has any motivation to steal this body, and it's empty, and it's gone, and we've got to unpack and go, what happened here? What is it that happened with this Jesus? Because he was there, and now the tomb is empty. So this is recorded and transmitted by Paul, that the tomb was empty. It appears in Mark's. It appears in all of our Gospels. And the earliest known Jewish response, right, to this empty tomb, it was discovered by women. It was discovered by women. And here's this crazy part. If I'm making up a story, if I'm trying to fabricate a story and talk to you guys, in ancient Jewish society, women were not highly regarded. Now, you can feel one way or another about it, but you know this to be true in our own American not-so-recent history, right? Like, not so far-off history. That people are treated a certain way based on their gender or their race. But in this ancient Jewish society, women were not allowed to even stand up in court. Like, if you were an eyewitness to a thing and you would say, hey, I saw it, here's what happened, they would go, no, you're a woman. We're not going to allow you in court. No. And so for the basis of Christianity to be that women were the very first ones to go to the tomb of Jesus, see that it was empty, run back and tell the disciples, he's not there, he's risen, says to everyone around, wait, what? You're basing all of this off a woman's testimony, it makes no sense to fabricate or to make up any of that unless it's true. Unless that's what actually happened. And so when we look at the Bible, when we look at this account of the resurrection of Jesus, we can look and say that people that say, well, Jesus didn't actually die on the cross. And you can go, I don't think so. Like, that makes zero sense. Even before he was crucified, he was flogged, right? He was beaten with a leather whip where the ends of that whip had pieces of stone and metal and glass shards in it. So they whipped him near death and then crucified him. There's no way that he survives any of that. And so you can't tell me that he passed out on the cross. Because let's go with this. Let's go with this, right? That Jesus somehow doesn't really die on the cross. But then he gets up 3 days later and comes and says, hey, here I am. Now, if you've survived this brutal beating and you've almost suffocated on a cross and you've been hit with a spear to where you're bleeding, and this beaten, battered, bruised, near-dead Jesus comes and says, I am the Lord. I've conquered death. And he's still bleeding and still beaten. That doesn't really inspire any confidence. I think it takes more faith to believe that than it does to believe that he actually got up from the grave, because he's halfway dying. There's no way that inspires any type of confidence in me. And so we talk about Jesus being a real man, Jesus really living, right? That Jesus was really crucified, he was really buried, that the tomb was empty. Tom Anderson. Tom Anderson was the president of the California Lawyers Association. And part of his quote says this, that the silence of history is deafening when it comes to testimony against the resurrection. But here's what it says in full, that if I want to pose a question, with an event so well publicized, being the death and resurrection of Jesus, with an event being so well publicized, don't you think that it's reasonable that one historian or one eyewitness or one antagonist would record for all time that they had seen Christ's body? The silence of history is deafening when it comes to the testimony against the resurrection. That there is not one single account anywhere of anyone saying, whoa, you guys are talking about this Jesus that died and came back to life. I saw his body. Nowhere. Not one. Anywhere. That speaks volumes. That screams that, hey, there's something going on here, and we've got to stop, and we've got to look at that. We've got to. Last big fact. Second to last. That Jesus appeared post-burial. That Jesus appeared. That Jesus was seen by people. That he was seen by his disciples individually and collectively, that he was seen by a group of over 500, that people actually saw him on multiple occasions over the course of about a month, that people saw him. And now here's how we try to explain that away. Oh, well, you had a hallucination, right? That explains it. Jesus died, he was buried, you saw him later on, you were hallucinating. So here's the medical thing about hallucinations. One, hallucinations happen in one sensory field. And what I mean by that is you either see a hallucination, or you hear a hallucination, or you feel it. Not all three. That's not the way it happens. Either I thought I saw something, or I thought I heard something, or I thought I felt something. But the accounts of Jesus says that, no, we sat with him, we talked with him. Thomas says, I touched the hole in his hands. The disciples say, he sat with us and said, you guys got anything to eat? I'm hungry. It's been 3 days. Right? Like, this is what happens. And so hallucinations, one, don't happen in multiple senses. Now, here's the other thing. Everybody do this for me real quick. Close your eyes. Let's imagine that we're on a beach somewhere. That blue sky, sun, it's beautiful outside. And there's a guy walking up to us. What color is this guy's hair? On 3, just say it out loud. 1, 2, 3. Ooh, wow, okay. Ooh, that didn't work out. Wait a minute, let's try it again. There's this guy, and his hair is black, blue, brown, red, and we're all there on this beach. We're hallucinating together now. Let's try it, okay? And this guy opens up his mouth and says one word. I don't know how, other than to tell you that he said, hey, I don't know how for all of us to imagine what that word is. What did he say to all of us at the same time? So here's what we know about pickles. Here's what we know about hallucinations. They're just like dreams. Outside of the movie Inception, they don't happen collectively. I can't lay my head down and all of us dream the same thing. Even if I say, hey, let's put it on a beach somewhere together with beautiful sand and waves and you can hear we don't dream the same thing. We don't hallucinate the same things. There's no way that happens in a collection. And so, fact is, Jesus appeared to people post-burial. One historian says this, that a skeptic, right, of the resurrection, he does not believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, but he says this, I conclude that the appearances are a historical certainty. I'm struggling to believe this resurrection thing, but as far as Jesus appearing to people, historically certain. It absolutely happened. His tomb is empty and people saw him later on. I can't fully explain that. I can't fully unpack that, but that's absolutely what happened. Last one. His disciples were transformed. The people that believed in Jesus' lives were transformed. They went from denying him and running away from him and saying, I don't want anything to do with him. I never knew him. And they went from that to leading these full lives and saying, no, Jesus is absolutely, in fact, the risen Lord, the risen Christ. And it's really weird when you look at not only his disciples' lives, but you look at Paul's life, who was the biggest persecutor of Christians. He went out and killed them on purpose because of what they believed, and then he became Christian because he said, I saw him. That Jesus' brother James says, hey, I thought my brother was crazy, and then I saw him, and now I believe. See, here's the thing is, people will die for what they believe. They absolutely will. And all of them died for what they believed. But they were in this very unique place in history. That it wasn't about what they believed, they were eyewitnesses. And so while I tell you that people will die for what they believe, no one dies for something that they know to be false. I might trick you into a thing and say, you say, oh, I believe that, and we go to our deaths because we believe it's true. But if you knew it to be false, if you knew that that's not actually what happened, nobody dies for that. Nobody dies for that. And all these men went to their graves proclaiming Jesus is risen, he is the Lord, and we will live our lives in his name. So what do you do with that? What do you do with that when you have to look at the Bible and say, this is what happened? That this man lived and died and got up again. When you stop looking at it as fable and lore, because these things were written right when it happened, and you go, yes, Jesus rose, alive, well, eating, drinking, talking, laughing, hugging. What do you do with that? Because here's what I can tell you is what you can't do. You can't go back and say, well, that's just a good story. You can't go back and say, well, Jesus was just a really good guy that said a lot of cool things, because he leaves no room for that. He's either a lunatic or a liar or he is Lord. And you've got to come to grips with that. You've got to look at that, because Jesus says this, that I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, that no man comes to the Father but through me. When you look at all these facts, the only reasonable explanation is this, is that Jesus was raised from the dead by God, that he proved it. So now what? Now what? Now, some of us have never come to grips with that. That wait, this is real. This isn't just a made-up story. This is real life. that if this man died and came back 3 days later, I think you ought to listen to him. I think you want to know what he says. And if he says that he's God and that's how he proved it, I think you owe him your life. I know I do. And so with all our eyes closed and all our heads bowed, maybe that's you. Maybe you've never looked at the evidence like this. Maybe these facts have challenged the way you've looked at the world, the way you looked at the Bible. And you're coming to grips even now going, wow, now that I know this in my head, it's doing something to my heart. And so what I'm asking you guys is maybe you've never come to the place of saying, Jesus, I believe. I believe that you are the Son of God. I believe that you were raised from the dead. And I want to know you. Those that you would just look up at me. That you would just make eye contact and say, man, I've never looked at it like that. I've never seen it like that, and I need to know more. I need to have some questions answered. I need to have a relationship with this God-man who got up out of the grave. If he can do that for himself, what can he do for me? And so if that's you, just look on up. Make eye contact with me. All right, all eyes up, all eyes up. Here's what we're doing now, is maybe, just maybe, all right, we're going to open up for you. That if this was you, that you struggled with the facts, it was you looking up going, yeah, that's me. I don't know this guy, but I need to. If he can get up from the grave, like, we've got to talk about this. We've got to answer some questions. Then here I am. And so I'm going to meet you right here if you would come and meet me. So if that's you, would you just come up on the count of 3, say, look, I'm just going to get up and I'm going to hand my life over to him. I need some questions answered. I'm not all the way there, but this evidence is compelling. We've got to talk. 1, 2, 3. All right. So here's where we are now. Is either we have placed our faith in this Christ, that he is our risen Lord, that he is our hope, or we have not. We're not quite there yet. And here's my hope, that for those that have not, that you would get questions answered, because it's really hard to look at this evidence and go, yeah, I mean, I can see how that's true, but I still don't believe. It still doesn't bother me. It still doesn't affect me when this guy got up from the dead. So ask questions. There's adults all around the room. Would you just ask them those questions? That you wouldn't even wait. That for the rest of us that have already placed our faith, that we have one more opportunity to enter into worship. All right? That you would worship him for that. And so let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for speaking loud and clear, not only in the Bible, but throughout history altogether. That you would affect our hearts and our minds, God. That you would challenge us to look at what actually happened. And that you would lead us and draw us back to you. And so, God, I ask that you would continue to challenge these students, that you would continue to challenge not only their hearts, but their minds, God, and that you would answer all their questions. And we thank you for that. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. All right, guys. Thank you very much, Ben. Ben Dishman? No, here we go. Hey, it's me. Oh, there we go. I got it, guys. Hey, here's what we're doing. City Cruise tonight. City Cruise tonight. Now hear me. Hold on. Because some of you guys didn't hear me last time. If Ben or myself or Cody Dugan or Heather Snell takes you home, would you just go, hey, guys, that's me. Come on. Oh, yeah? Oh, we good tonight? Okay, I see you. So you and all the rest of us. that want to take part in the City Cruise, you want to talk about some of the things that we talked about tonight, the City Cruise are happening just outside those doors. Go to the left, back in 104. We're going to sit in those groups, and we're going to talk about some of this. We're going to spend some time answering some questions, and so you guys are invited to that. To the rest of us, I hope that you guys would join me back in the cafe. If this is your first time, you've never been here on Wednesday
Not in my DM, OJ Simpson with the defense. Leg of fire saying knee in last weekend, but not today, say.
The devil, ayy. I think I know where he live, ayy. I think he in politics, ayy. I think you getting my drift, ayy. Yeah, I think he made the Explore page. I seen him at my last court date. I'm asking Lord, give me more faith. It's cold in these streets like a North Face, ayy. Gotta keep my face north and I know my day short. So I stay woke, never days off. Cause evil never taking no days off. Roll there, big fella, don't try it. Get that corn on my face, you know I'm on a diet. And I'm treating all of your lie like United. That just ain't flying, not today, Satan.
Yeah, I know your ways. Already read all your plays. Yeah, I think I'm booked for tomorrow. Yeah, and today just ain't your day. Hey, hey, I see you feeding they hate. See the bodies that you take. We do not break, never no breaks. Building this place on top of your day. Come and see me body. Ooh, my squad too deep. Got it covered like Newsweek. Kicking these fat like Bruce Lee. Yeah, in front of W's like UV. Yeah, UV. Sun gotta shine, Lord, use me. Hit him with the ooh. Come my shit, don't let him fool you. He bring up your past, boy, bring up his future. Yeah, we not confused. Yeah. We not confused. We not confused. Yeah. Your name is racist, hatred graces. All this racist traces straight to your engagement to face the natures. But on that day, you face the maker. Back to day,
Satan, not today. Amen.
Yeah. Low. Yeah. 360 in the contract. Never that. I just take the contact. I bring it back. I'm running on the fast break. Behind the back. Yeah, this that penny with the shack.
If he's passing me the rock, you might not get it back. They never gave a hand, now they wanna give me that. I don't know where you been. I got fear of God, ain't no fear of man. These them air minios, yeesh, need a pair of them.
LA, man, I feel like magic. LA, I can't stand the traffic. West side for the vacation. Yeah, Westbrook on the isolation.
Yeah. So New York City gotta keep it Mickey Mantle, the bubble jacket with the periwinkle camo, From Argentina, it's a military issue, And Lloyd said don't mix the pit bull with the shit, so don't do it.
I just threw it off the backboard. Game winner, I'm the one they asked for. Magic. I need meditation.
6 deep, Peter Luger made the reservation.
Pass the check right in, no hesitation.
Spotify to show the kid love. I'm like, what a week. Everybody trying to get my plug number for the years. Woo. I told my love, baby, we should leave. Then we go and get the pho, that's that Vietnamese. Yeah, so shout out all the single mothers, 2 jobs, 3 kids. I call that a triple double, call plays in the huddle. God, I'm in trouble. Shorties want me sub 'em in and they sure ain't being so
Well, now the hometown kids finally took the tour foreign. I don't never ever chase dreams, man, I stalk them. Had to tell myself, stop grinning when they walked in. Cause you were showing all love, I knew all in. Wow, took a Gatorade shower. Yes, I do. Game time, I'm like Jock Bauer. Thought you know. 2, 3 every 24 hours. They know it's the low 5 with the most high power. God.